Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wholehearted Loving. I'm Stephanie.
Hi, I'm Georgiana.
Georgiana today is pictured with little Gigi. If you're watching, you can see her little child doll, which we both have one. Maybe I'll put a link in the show notes if people want to order their own inner child doll. You can do that.
Yes. Isn't she sweet?
She's very sweet.
I think I was 1.5 in this picture
That's adorable.
with my beautiful bowl cut.
Classic.
Everyone needs a bowl cut once in their life, right?
I don't know if I ever had a bowl cut, I don't know.
No.
I don't know. I'm sure my mother will tell me.
I had mine.
Very good. Okay. Let's do a body-based self-connection practice before we get into this episode, in which we will be picking up the psychological defenses against emotions that we were talking about last week. We're going to talk about a couple of those more specifically today. But first, a self-connection practice to connect with ourselves and our bodies before we connect with each other and this podcast.
Yeah, do you have one in mind, or are you wanting me to share one?
I don't. I notice you're rocking back and forth.
I'm rocking back and forth and I'm squeezing her hands.
Yeah.
So maybe just if you want to rock back and forth, see how that feels. And also give your hands a squeeze. Squeeze and release. Squeeze and release. Do that a couple times with your hands. And then we can also do that with the shoulders. Bring them up. Feel tension and slowly release. And create that tension and release. Do that a few times. Just notice how that feels to feel tension and then to feel ease and relaxation immediately after. I'm like holding her like a football. I don't know if you've ever held a baby like that, but it feels comforting. But this muscle tension and release is really a helpful tool for nervous system regulation. And in our last, I think, Priming the Body for Peace call, we did a whole series of that last Wednesday night, I think. And what was so neat about that was to hear one person who lives in New York was just in Times Square all night long, came into the call with so much energy, high energy. And afterwards, she said, I feel so peaceful and ready to just ease into sleep. And it just goes to show how really simple practices can make such a big difference. Yeah. Right? We just did really simple body and breath movements where we tensed up a little bit and then we slowly released throughout the body. And it makes a huge difference.
That's for sure. Have you ever been in Times Square?
I have.
Yes. Not
Times
a sleepy
Square,
place.
Not a sleep, and Grand Central Station, not sleepy places. The Netherlands in general, where you pack 32 million people in a tiny place, not a sleepy place.
Not a sleepy place, yeah. Yeah, it's hard for me to imagine. It takes me a couple of hours usually to wind down after some high intensity thing. So coming home from Times Square, it would have been 10 p.m. for her when we started that call.
Yeah.
And by 11, she's ready to sleep. Beautiful.
Yeah. So we can do little versions of that. Just, tightening the fists, releasing the shoulders. Do that with your feet.
Yeah. Will you tell us a bit about, so when we were about to start recording, you were like, hang on, I need to hold on to something today. And you went and got your baby. Can you tell us a little bit about why the action of holding, of cradling in that way is helpful for our nervous systems?
Well, first, I can tell that. First, what I noticed, I think as you become more deeply connected with your own body and what feels good and what doesn't, you start to realize what you want moment to moment and what feels maybe missing and what could feel better because you've experienced better before. Because that's what happened. We were about to record and something felt a little off, like something felt missing. And I was like, what is that? What is that thing that feels missing? And I was like, I think I need to hold something. And I mean, there's tons of pillows on the couch. I could have held anything. But I was reminded of her, my little pillow that has my 1.5-year-old face on it with a cute little dress I picked out for myself. And I had the image in my mind of what would it be like to hold that pillow during this podcast. And then I had the body feel of, oh, it would feel like this. And I was like, yep. And I said to Steph, hold on a second. I need to go get something. I just knew that I needed to have something in front of my body. For some reason, this area in front of me just felt, I don't know if it was a bit vulnerable, a little bit too open and raw or something. And I'm like, it needs something, it needs some pressure in the front. I need to be able to hold it. It needs to feel soft. And now that I hold her, I feel like good in my body. So that's the invitation, is to notice what helps you feel good in your body. And are those things also good for you and good for your life? Because sometimes we choose things that might feel momentarily good for our bodies, but aren't actually very good for us. So this is where we get to practice that. And I think the act of holding, fancier terms, I think one of the terms is proprioception. So like feeling something on our body can help regulate the system. I always find it to be this front chest part of our body. When we were little babies and young children, assuming you had well-attuned parents, if you were upset, even if you weren't upset, they would hold you. Your chest would be against their chest. There'd be some warmth here, a bit of pressure here. And so in my mind, I feel like that's imprinted in us, that when you bring that back, it's like why hugs feel good, right? Or can feel good. It's my body just totally, yeah. It sinks in. It feels happy. And then I have another theory. I'm sure there's research on this. Maybe it's to do with me like being a mother, but I don't know. You're not a mom, but I think I feel like your body has maybe a similar reaction. Like if you hold something that has a little bit of weight to it, what do you notice, Steph? Like, does it feel comforting? Like, can you really feel like super mad and angry, or does it sort of soften you?
Yeah, it definitely softens.
Right?
It's an externalizing of care, I think.
It reminds me of, like, I don't know if it was grade 8, 9, or 10 in like whatever class it was. Hold the bag of sugar. It's your baby. Keep it alive. Right? I feel like as human beings, like when we hold something in our arms that sort of symbolizes something smaller, more tender, more vulnerable that we're meant to care for, it must release some sort of chemicals in us that help us care and,
Yeah.
soften.
Yeah. Yeah, that feeling of care and protection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So grab
Beautiful.
something that feels good to hold on to and carry and see how that feels.
Okay, so we were going to pick up that lovely list of
Yes.
psychological defenses against emotions. That very
And I wanted
familiar.
I wanted to say, when you said earlier, like, this is the topic for today, it sounds so technical. It sounds like some research paper. And you said, we're going to talk about psychological defenses against emotions. And like inside, I just had this laugh. I'm like, oh, you mean we're going to talk about how we deal with life?
Yes. All of the coping. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me pull up the list. So we went over the list in the last episode. We did a rundown. And now we're going to go a bit deeper into these. There are 15 of them, so we'll see how many we get through. But repression and suppression. So I'm going to read the blurbs underneath these descriptions, and then we can go into it a little bit. And I lump these together because they're the same thing, but the first, regression, is unconscious, repression is unconscious, and suppression is conscious.
Okay.
So repression. When we repress our emotions, we prevent them from even entering our conscious awareness in the first place. They are pushed out of awareness unconsciously. Not being able to recall that one has ever been angry with one's mother is a clear example of repression. That's a funny example.
Tell me why you think that's a funny example.
Well, anger, first of all, is, I think, the most obvious repression, right? Generally speaking, it's socially unacceptable. Women especially tend to turn angry responses into tears and sadness. Instead, we try to transmute it into something more socially acceptable. And in all the trainings that we lead, repressed anger is the most obvious one. When we lead anger
Yeah.
release processes specifically, most of the people in the room will start out believing truly that they don't have any anger.
Mm-hmm.
And once they start releasing it, they realize, a lot about themselves and the feelings they've been repressing. And they feel 50 pounds lighter. They're
Mm-hmm.
sparkling after we move some of that energy. So it's obviously been really stuck inside. Um, and just the fact that it's about mothers is funny. People come into these trainings and into this work with a lot of mother wounding
Mm-hmm.
and repressed anger, and typically from mothers who have their own repressed anger, right? It's a cycle.
Mm-hmm. And grandmothers who have their repressed anger. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think there's a large population of people who know they're very angry with their mothers. And then there's the population who are like, no, my mother did her best and she loves me. And like all of that can be totally true. And like for me, especially, I had to learn that you can love somebody, you can see they did their best, you can have a good or relatively good relationship with them in present day, and also not realize there's so much anger collected over the decades that you never gave any care and attention and space to feel. And that was big for me to learn that, because I think I was afraid to admit, afraid to see that I could love someone and feel deeply angry and hurt by things that they had done or not done that I needed or didn't need.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with our mothers as well, and often with people we just spend a lot of time with or know deeply, there can be a lot of suppression that happens for good reasons. If you're annoyed at someone's repetitiveness, for example, you might not need to express that annoyance. Maybe you just suppress that a little, move a little energy later on, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What am I
Maybe
thinking?
I'll read that blurb since we're going to
Mm-hmm.
get into both of
Okay.
them.
Yeah, let's do that.
So, suppression. When we suppress our emotions, we consciously try to push them away from our awareness. As soon as one remembers an instance of being angry with one's mother, consciously pushing the memory away by trying not to think about it or to forget it in another way, such as thinking about something else, is an example of suppression.
Mm-hmm.
Also, hearing intellectualizing in there, thinking about something else instead of the feeling that you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. Thinking about, I've done this, thought about something else, but I've also done intellectualizing in the sense of like making excuses for people's behavior because I understand where it's coming from. Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a huge one. Yeah, I think there's a couple of phrases like that I hear often, especially from women, especially from women who are dating or, starting relationships or even ending relationships where they're saying, oh, but I can see his good heart. And in my view, we all have good hearts. And what's piled on top of there? And, what do we have to spend every day interacting with? So really easy to suppress all our feelings of fear, our fears of abandonment, all of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff would come up.
Mm-hmm.
Fears of being alone, we'll just push those down and we'll say,
Yeah.
but I understand why they are the way they are. It's very painful for me, but I understand it.
This is, I think, a really important piece to talk about because I've done this so much, when it comes to men and relationships, like making excuses for behavior of, oh, I can understand. And when I look back and I piece things together, I see that I've been doing that since I was a little kid. And where my parents would do things or say things that are just really hurtful and harmful, didn't know how to make sense of it as a kid, have to somehow make sense of it, know that my parents actually do love me. So told myself something like, oh, they're just having a hard day. Oh, that's just how people talk to their kids. And those all might be true. But I never addressed that. And that really scares me and hurts me to hear my parents say those things to me. right? And I would see that I would do that in adult relationships as well. And so I believe that when you grow up having to excuse behavior of adults who are meant to care for you, it's easy to continue that path along, to excuse other people's poor behavior or harmful behavior and try to look for the silver lining, look for what's good. Like as a kid, I couldn't just see my parents as monsters. That'd be very terrifying. Felt something was off, but somehow had to excuse it in a way that still made them decent people.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to practice having understanding and compassion for someone and also saying, that hurt me and that's not okay. And I don't want to be treated that way.
Yeah. This is making me think of all the adaptations we make, right? We try to make things make sense. We try to make things feel safe and good. And a lot of the ways that we might suppress things, by making excuses or explaining things away, I think that is also making me think about child lying. We talked about that, I think, a few episodes ago, kids telling lies. And in this context, it seems to me that that's a method of suppression. To try to
Lying to
push away
ourselves.
bad feelings, we tell lies. Well, even if we're afraid of our parents'
Mm.
responses to
Yeah.
something, we'll push that away with a lie or, with some other kind of diverting behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lying to others, lying to ourselves. I lied to myself a lot,
Oh, yeah.
trying to make behavior okay. And I practice using this. I feel like this is a way of working out this repression suppression stuff. Is like bringing it to light, the things that we push away. That prompt of the reality is,
Mm,
right? I imagine if someone would have guided me as a young child, I might have said, the reality is I love my parents. The reality is I feel very scared when they say mean things to me. The
mhm,
reality is I don't understand why they're saying these things to me because nobody else in my life says these things to me. Why would my parents say these things to me? The reality is I don't know when they're going to say nice things to me and mean things to me. And I feel like I'm on guard all the time.
mm.
The reality is I feel really scared and I don't feel like I can talk to them about this. Like, and I imagine, imagine if as a child you had that safe space, that welcoming, that invitation to say, this is my reality.
And not
What
have
you
that
would
be argued
realize,
with.
yeah, what you would realize, like, oh, I don't have to suppress all this.
Yeah.
Where I could just talk to someone about what my reality is and they're just going to sit and listen and offer care.
Mm, yeah, I think that's been missing and is coming. I think these are the next steps of human evolution, quite frankly,
Mhm.
not to sound too grandiose, but
Mhm.
I think we've moved into feelings and we're figuring out how to do that as individuals, as parents, as children.
Mhm. Right. And
Yeah.
I think something we can practice is finding a safe person to sit across from us, sit beside us, and be able to say these things out loud. The reality is, and like be energetically, emotionally held, physically held in that, and all the feelings that arise and all the big sensations that arise.
Hmm. Yeah. One of the major areas that we see repressed anger come up is politicization. So people who are unaware that they have a lot of anger are expressing it in ways that make perfect sense. There's plenty to be enraged about. I'm not saying that one ought not be angry about socio-political realities or the environment or things like that. Rather, this means that anger is a sentiment within all humans, and we're just focusing it that way. So it is there, it is just a feeling you could be experiencing, but instead we're giving it a target. We're making it make sense. Um, and that can really get away with us, and that can really start to run our lives and make us feel trapped and extra afraid, you know? A
Mm-hmm.
diversion of a feeling is not the same as an expression of a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's something I want everyone to realize, it's that moving that anger energy, instead of just giving it a target, moving it in healthy ways, getting some of it out of your body, uh, is really life-giving.
Mm-hmm. And I think also having the curiosity to see where it might originate from, or at least some parts of it originate from, and addressing the hurt and the pain in that,
Yeah.
and learning to be held in that, and having some healing in that. I imagine if you move some angry energy and also heal some of the origins of the hurt and the anger, that whatever beliefs you have and things you want to fight for, you have the energy to do that from a much more grounded place and a much more clear-minded place.
Mhm. And actually, I think a more helpful place, like a more
Mhm.
practically helpful place.
Mhm.
I did frontline social work for 15 years, and you could just easily call me an angry political lesbian, is what I was for a long time. And it was certainly in some good faith efforts to get some social and political change that I think were very important. But it was also an unconscious effort in rumination and rehashing and just getting deeper into this anger. Like there's no healing to be found in that. There's a lot of venting can be a step in healing for sure. But it more just stirs the pot, you know? And it doesn't move anything or change anything. And I think it actually increases overall levels of stress and anxiety in one's body and in one's community. So I think there are important steps there, but recognizing, as you say, the source of this anger and
Mhm.
not only displacing it can make
Mhm.
much better use of that energy.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Hmm.
What do you notice about people in our trainings moving their anger?
I noticed that a lot of people are initially, either they know they have lots of anger that they want to get out, and sometimes they feel excited. Some people know they have a lot of anger pent up and they're terrified of it. They're terrified that they're going to like lose their minds. They're terrified that they're going to be out of control. They're terrified they might hurt themselves or someone else. They're terrified that they might not be able to hold love for that person and feel anger at the same time. Um, and it's always amazing when people make that choice of, I am scared of it and I know it's time to lean into it a bit. And I mean, I was one of those people. I was like, I'm not angry. I'm just sweet and kind. Can't you see? And the anger processes were scary for me. It was scary for me to be in a room with people who were angry, because I feel like my dad was so angry and explosive in his energy and his words that I did everything in my adult life to like stay away from that. So why am I going to put myself in a room? Like I chose every partner possible who had certainty was so soft and kind and would never bring any angry energy into our relationship. So why would I voluntarily put myself in a room where people are moving anger?
Mm.
And I remember, I think one of the first days being in that room where, you know, that was the activity of the night. I really said to myself, my learning in this moment is not even to express my own anger. My learning is just to feel my butt on the chair and like look at my surroundings and see what's actually in front of me and feel some of this, you know, like activation come up in my body, this fear come up, and know that I'm actually safe here. Like this is a controlled, safe, intentional environment where we're just practicing together.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to be so afraid of loud energy, um, mean words, because that was terrifying for me from childhood.
Right.
And to be able to feel powerful and centered in myself and to be in this environment where it mimicked a little bit, right? Obviously different. It's not my dad. I'm not 5. But it was really important for me to like get to feel what happened in my body, and also know I have the ability to bring regulation to my body. There are people here to support me. It's not the same situation as being 5 and dependent on my parents and terrified of them at the same time. So that
Yeah.
was really important. And I see that in other people who practice these things. That was just even the first step. And then to like be able to launch into expressing the energy of anger, the words of anger, that was big for me.
Yeah. Okay, I
Mhm.
want to talk about your red toque, but first I want to say, unsurprisingly, we had the exact opposite life experience and experience in those rooms with anger, with this um, generated feelings of anger expression we were doing. In my home, there was no yelling, there was no anger. And so and as a person with big feelings, I unconsciously, and this is another effect of repression, an unconscious effect of repression, we seek out those elements in ourselves that we're repressing in our external relationships, right? We need that mirror. So unsurprisingly, I've had, I mean, not all of them, but certainly the last partner I had was a big, loud, gregarious, and often angry, passionate man. And in those rooms, when the big anger processes were coming up, where you were feeling you needed to regulate your nervous system, I was like, haha, there's juice. Finally, like, here's all the big feelings. Like, I prided myself on being able to be in big, intense situations and feel nothing, you know?
Mhm.
That was
Feel nothing and feel
feel
nothing.
feel nothing, right? So
Mhm.
that numbing that I'd engaged in my whole
Mhm.
life was shown to me in these moments where the anger felt like finally big feelings were moving. Finally, people were being honest. Finally, people were expressing. It felt like a huge relief, you know. Also scary because I didn't recognize I had any anger. I
Mhm.
stepped back. I volunteered initially for that process, and the teacher was like, no, 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 someone who's done this before. I receded and I watched the process happen, and I was horrified. It's like I could never. But it was just a huge amount of energy in my body. And then I,
Mhm.
slowly baby stepped into the process, and it was like heaven.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was so good. I needed that in my
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
And it was really healing and reclaiming that part of myself. Like, I'm allowed to be an angry person. I'm allowed to feel angry. It doesn't make me a bad person. I can express my anger. It doesn't make me a bitch.
Yeah. And that's something we all learn in those rooms. When somebody finally expresses themselves authentically, even when it's ugly,
Mhm.
even if it's mean, the feedback they get from everybody is, I feel closer to you, I feel safer with you, I trust you more, and I find you
Mhm.
more attractive. Like,
Mhm.
those are the responses across the board.
Mhm.
And you, furious little Georgiana, were given the alter ego of anger, right, from that movie Inside Out.
Yeah, so I was that little dude.
Oh, so cute. Hard to stand it. Furious little Gigi in a red toque and a schoolgirl outfit, you
It
think?
was like a white, like, men's work shirt and a tie or something. I think it was a
Yes.
little dude like
Oh,
that. Yeah.
God, you were so cute. And I could feel you stewing beside me, trying to get angry. And there was someone who'd been given the alter ego of Donald Trump, and someone who was like an anti-oil protester, and they're all doing their thing at the front of the room, and I felt you get up. I felt you get your little rage, and you took this sign and you smashed it down, and you used some foul language. It was amazing.
And it felt so good. Like, I mean, I think every time we've witnessed it and every time we've done it ourselves, it's like you get a part of yourself back. A part of yourself you never even knew you locked away and lost. A part
Yeah.
of yourself you didn't even know you needed to be connected to. And everyone is happy and smiling and relieved afterwards. I think feeling that much more permission to be themselves and to be human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and opened. Like chakras have opened, energy is moving in
Mm-hmm.
places it hasn't
Mm-hmm.
been for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
or where it's been stagnant for a long
Yeah.
time.
And I think this is interesting because I've gone through phases. Because if you would have um, met me as a teenager, in our interaction, our friendship, you would have also thought I was like lovely and sweet. But if we ever talked about my parents, that's when you would have known I was like angry as hell.
Right.
And I think at that time in my life, what I was suppressing was actually that I was very sad and hurt and felt a real distance and a disconnection from my parents. I wanted to feel a closeness. I didn't know how to express that. So it all turned into anger. And then as I got older and I had more compassion for my parents, I became a mother myself. I was like, oh, yeah, I get it. And they did their best. Then I was more into sadness. And I was like, oh, I just feel sad that I had that childhood. I could connect much more to my sadness as I was older. And then I disconnected completely from my anger. And that's the other thing is I realized I didn't grow up learning that you could love someone and feel angry at them at the same time. And I didn't grow up understanding that you can feel sad about something and feel angry about it.
Yeah.
And so as an adult, I needed to connect back more to anger, something that I think I probably told myself, oh, you're an adult now. Like, don't be like off the rails, like composed,
Right.
respectful, understanding, compassionate. You can be sad about what happened, but you don't need to be like super pissed off about it. And also, and I hear this a lot, what difference is it going to make?
Right.
How is that going to make my life better to feel angry about it now when I can't change what happened?
Yeah.
And that, yeah.
I see sadness and anger. The visual I get is the infinity symbol.
Mm.
Anger is protecting sadness, is protecting anger, is protecting sadness, on it goes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, there was something you said in there that I wanted to respond to. Where we express. Oh, I know what it is. Joy.
Mm.
Ironically, horrifyingly, sadly, we spend a lot of time, I think, suppressing joy
Mm-hmm.
because of some fear feelings that we've probably repressed. I often witness people who are in some joyful experience, like being in love. A lot of people around me are in love right now. And it's so quick and easy for that to be overtaken with fear and with planning for the worst, because we just are not accustomed to experiencing the sensation of joy. We haven't expanded our joy muscle. We're
Mm-hmm.
suppressing it because
I've
we
had
fear
to
being hurt.
intentionally learn how to experience joy, bring more joy, notice joy, feel it. I think I was terrified that it would go away, terrified if I hoped for joy, I would just be disappointed. Um, I grew up in a home, like sometimes we do the exercise with people about our emotional homes growing up, right? The emotional home I grew up in was, I remember my mom just feeling sad all the time. I remember my dad feeling angry, but I think the one that registered in me is like sadness. There was always like an underlying level of sadness and longing. That's like the opposite of joy. So,
Mm,
what felt very comfortable in my body was some type of sadness and longing. And I saw that in relationships. I saw that in education. I saw that in career. Like, I don't think I identified as a depressed person, but like, it was always just like maybe just a bit above okay. But like on the outside, I'd be smiling and happy and whatever. But the inside feeling would
yeah.
have a flavor of the sadness and longing. And there was a point where I'm like, there must be more in life than this. I think it really hit me hearing Brene Brown talk about, if you numb the pain, you numb the joy. I was like, oh, okay. I think I got to do
Oh,
some work around this.
right?
And so I decided to be really intentional about looking for joy, noticing joy, letting myself feel it for one breath longer. Yeah, so all the things.
This is how painful pain is, right? We numb ourselves from it, even though it causes us to feel less joy. And joy is a thing we're pretending to feel while insisting internally that we must not feel it in case it one day goes away because we don't want to miss it. We're
But we got
just
to put on some fake
wild,
joy for everybody else.
isn't it? What are we doing?
What are we doing? Well, it's such a process. I've had so much fun with this process of learning how to feel and embody and express each of these, emotional experiences. And I want to talk about my red toque a little bit more. So the red toque was part of the initial like alter ego costume of being this anger dude from the movie. But then what I realized was it wasn't integrated, it wasn't embodied in me yet to really give myself permission to feel and express my anger. Like I didn't feel like Georgianna as I was at that point. If I'm doing the exercise and I put on the costume, I can let myself rage. But if I'm just like being myself, like that was too big of a stretch still. I hadn't integrated that part into myself. And so I remember saying to you, so Steph, like sometimes if I'm angry, can I put on my toque and call you and like just be angry and say all the angry things? And I think you were delighted at that idea.
Yes.
But that's what I needed. Like I needed these baby steps. It wasn't in me yet to just call someone up and say, "Hey, I feel really angry about this and this is what I think about it."
Yeah.
And
It makes sense. We got
yeah.
a life of masks, right? We've learned all these ways to be acceptable because deep down we fear we're not. And if you
Mhm.
put on this red toque, you're allowed to be so and so. If you put on, we even talk about, oh, I'm putting on my managerial hat, or here's my other hat. Like we have to make excuses all the time. And,
Mhm.
the truth is we don't. We might need to explain ourselves a little bit so that people can understand the context of what's going on, but it really is all allowed and welcome.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. So I don't feel the need anymore to put on the red toque before I express and feel my anger. I think I even very intentionally felt ready to donate the red toque. So I think it got donated. So I'm like, no, I feel like I know how to embody that part of me now, anger. I don't need the toque anymore. So I felt ready to donate
wonderful.
it.
That's great.
Um something I notice in the work that I do with men is not yes, there's also anger suppressed. Like I think what I've noticed is from what they tell me, they feel it, but they feel maybe a need to not express it,
Yeah.
to not hurt anybody, um, because they haven't learned ways of expressing the anger that don't hurt people. But also their sadness. There are really like lots of men feeling sad about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it's been really interesting watching men connect to their tears and their sadness,
Mm-hmm.
and to see that they desire the same things, right? To feel
Yeah.
understood, to feel accepted, to feel seen.
Mm.
And it's been really powerful work, I think, to tap into both sadness and anger for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's such an important reminder that anger is passion. It's passionate energy, it's creative energy, it's sexual energy. And I think there are men who are afraid to hurt people with their anger. But I think a huge amount of it now is about frightening people or making people feel unsafe, which is such a subjective thing. And one of the things I also love about the trainings we've done is watching men break through that fear of frightening people and
Mhm.
express their passionate energy in a way that's not directed at anyone or anything. It's just a
Mhm.
clear expression of it. And how much that revs the women in the room up,
Mhm.
or whoever's attracted to men in the room.
Mhm.
Um, they feel immediately aroused is really what
Mhm.
happens, and they feel closer to the person. They feel their own juices flowing. I don't mean sexually aroused, but often it's that as well. um, And these men then get to express this part of themselves that I think is the part that you're describing as becoming sadness. You know, when we're feeling like we can't express these basic energies that we contain within ourselves, we get really shut down and we feel really sad, you know. And sadness is the natural transmutation of anger, the socially unacceptable anger that frightens people. It's much easier for that to be sadness. And I think that disconnects people with a lot of the juice that like flows with life, that makes you want to create and exist and relate with people. So I think anger is
Yeah.
really important.
Yeah, I see that. I think there's a sadness from feeling repressed and suppressed. And then I think there's a sadness, like just a true sadness of after decades of being conditioned to believe that if you cry, you're weak, right? And you should just get over it and move on.
Yeah.
And there's actually things that people, men, feel sad about. And they have no one and nowhere to talk about that. And, so I'm glad when they do find safety in people to talk about that and they find an acceptance. And I'm glad that there's so many men's group and that's become a thing that I think definitely in our circle is very common. And I try
Mm-hmm.
to recommend it to everybody. When I work with women and their partners go to men's group, I can tell. I can
Mm-hmm.
tell the difference. And when I do couples work and the men go to men's group, I can tell. I can tell that these are men who feel more open to talk about their whole selves, their whole experience. I can see that they're men who have more openness and acceptance for their partner's feelings across the spectrum. And it's really lovely to see. And I'm like, oh, that's so wonderful
Yeah.
that work is being done on the
Yeah.
side and it gets to contribute to this relationship you're building together.
For sure. Yeah. It's also very cup filling work, right? You're getting so much love, so many reflections, so much chance to express yourself and be held outside of your relationship that your relationship is just 100 times better as a result.
Mhm. I think this too, suppressing the need for deep connection.
Mm,
How many of us have suppressed that need?
mhm. Yeah, a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I see it every time in women's group and men's group and like these co-ed groups. People become alive when they have this level of deep connection with people. And by deep connection, I just mean like being able to be yourself, be human,
Hmm.
express freely, and feel accepted. And I wish that we would all prioritize that part of ourselves that has that need
Hmm.
to be seen in that way, held in that way.
Yeah. And not considering a desire for connection to be too needy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of practice and experience to recognize that you're just allowed to have feelings and needs. No one needs to do anything about them. You can all just be together in a room feeling that way, and that's wildly supportive in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. What I've noticed in friendships over the years, when you're able to connect, when you're able to show your true self and you're able to accept someone for their true selves, you get into rooms where no alcohol is needed, like at all, and you can all have a great time. You get into a room where what I find, nobody is talking about other people. When you talk with someone, you talk about your experience. They talk about their experience. It's a very different way of connecting than what most of us are used to. Talking about so and so over there and so who lives over there and what are they doing over there. And I feel like as a society, like that's such a common way for people to connect. And it's not always like gossipy and bad, but it's just like, let's talk about something a bit further away from me and my life.
Mm,
And I find that, we are in a circle of people and the people who have experienced men's group, women's group, CRT and other work like this are more willing just to share from this is my heart and I want to hear and see yours and feel yours. And it's such a beautiful way to connect, I find. more than just surface level what's going on in your life. Like, I
Yeah.
remember going to moms groups when my oldest was born. I was like, I need something more than like, what's the best diaper cream? But that was sort of the level of connecting.
Right.
And then luckily I was like, I luckily was connected to that deeper need, and I sought it out. And I found this group of moms who felt similar. And they're like, I don't want to just know where the diapers are on sale. Like, that's great. But like, I really want to be seen in my experience as a mother. I want to see yours. Like, can we get together and actually just talk and like cry and celebrate and like talk about what's hard, talk about what's great. And I think it's great for our mental health to be able to have those kinds of connection.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you don't need lots. If everyone could prioritize creating one friendship like that in their life, that would make a huge difference.
Yeah. I think this is partly why people like fiction books and reality TV, is because you get to see inside the minds and hearts of people. And that's something we really desire, to see examples of how other people feel that give us permission to notice how we feel, examples of ways that we didn't realize we were feeling, or that we could be feeling, or that we might want to feel. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, coming together as groups of people, seeing the humanness in each other. I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed in group work too, how powerful it is for people to see themselves in other people. Like, oh, someone else struggles with the same thing. Someone else believes the same thing. Someone else wants the same thing. You mean it's okay for me to want that too? That is magical. But the other piece that's magical is, oh, you're saying something my partner keeps saying, and I never understood it. And I always thought he was an ass for it. And now I see your humanity and I understand where it's coming from.
Mm.
And it helps me see them through a different lens.
Yeah.
That's what I love.
Yeah. Powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That is the real benefit of gossip right there. Mutual understanding.
Mm-hmm. The real benefit of gossip. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was the first two in a list of 15. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's it for this episode, and we'll move on to denial as the next one
Lovely.
in the next
Yeah.
episode.
I think the invitation is to explore what may you have repressed in the past or suppressed, whether it's feelings or parts of yourself. Right?
Mm-hmm.
That, I think that was actually a huge part of my work. Like, if I was only, I think probably for a couple years, those were the main questions behind my work, my inner work.
Mm.
Which feelings have I repressed and suppressed? And which parts of myself have I repressed and suppressed? And am I willing to let myself see more of that, accept more of that, embody more of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, it was like, if you just do that, I think your life completely changes.
100%. Yeah, definitely. It's worth mentioning that within all of these emotions that we suppress are contained emotions that we have repressed, that we're not conscious of. So everything that we do consciously has this whole unconscious framework underneath it. And these are among the things you discover as well. So the type of suppression, I think, is a good thing to notice. If I'm doing the Marge Simpson thing, if you just take your anger and you just tamp it down, that's one thing. If you're at work and you're feeling angry and it's not appropriate to express anger right now, that's what I guess I'll call the healthy suppression. And later on, you want to move that energy in some way. But if you're noticing that you're suppressing something for not these external excuses, like being at work or, being around children or whatever it is, if you could theoretically right now express these feelings and you're feeling like you ought not to, there's going to be the feeling you're suppressing, and then there's going to be this big structure underneath it that is what you're just referring to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to explore within.
Can I share a really sweet story?
Yeah.
So I've worked with someone, a mom. It's like, I think that my daughter's young child, I think she gets frustrated and angry, starts like tapping, like hitting herself with her shoes, right? We were talking through that. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It sounds like she's aware that she needs to move some energy. Maybe she's noticing that when she gives herself that proprioceptive input, that hitting of the shoes on her body, it feels good and regulating. And so we thought, let's explore that a little bit, right? If, mom is not super comfortable with daughter maybe hitting herself hard, could you do that on the floor? Could you, like alternate tapping on the floor, alternate, like we talked about pushing energy into hands, right? I do this with my boys when I feel they're really angry. I'm like, can we take that energy? Can you like hold your hands in mine? We interlace our fingers and I just want you to just push all that angry energy into my hands right now. And they love doing that. And I had suggested this to this mom and see what would happen. And we talked about growling like angry lions, like how would the angry lions growl? And these are things I've worked with other families with over the decades. But yeah, I just put that out there. And she sent me a message and saying, my daughter loved it. Like, are there more things like this we can do? And it's because kids know they want to move that energy. They know that they need to get it out. And so
To be
many of us,
held
I
in
think,
that.
what's that?
To be held in that, to have that be a
Yeah.
shared experience with your caregivers,
Can you
enormous.
imagine? It's
Yeah.
being a shared experience. It's not being made wrong. It's actually being welcomed, invited out. Oh, show me that anger. Let me hear that roar.
Yeah.
Right? Let me feel you push all that anger into my hands. And such a different way of responding to a child's human nature. And whereas I think it's very common in society to want to suppress that, turn that away, shut it down, be
And
nice.
just like that, you have a lifetime of feeling like you're too much and you're
Mm-hmm.
not enough.
Mm-hmm. Right? So it doesn't matter that we're not 3 years old. You can still growl like an angry lion and see how that feels. You can still push into the wall. You can still find someone you trust and like say, let me just push all this anger energy into your hands. Would that be okay? And see how you feel afterwards.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a very sweet message to get.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
reminds me that kids know. Kids want our help to get that stuff out. If
Yeah.
we're willing to give them that space, they get it out and then they're back to like, I want to play, I want to laugh, I want to,
Yeah.
Yeah. They can connect to joy because they connected to their pain, then they go and they connect with their joy.
Well, I'm going to see if my mother's up for this.
That would be adorable.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
So neat. I wonder how that would be, with like sometimes you're in connection with people who have the capacity to talk through like anger and things with us and hold it. Sometimes they're not, but maybe they have the capacity to like hold your pushes.
Yeah.
Maybe they have capacity to like roar like a lion with you.
Yeah. Yeah, these are the neat things to explore because I know my mom's a bit of both. And if you're only in one zone with people, you can't explore, the entirety of the scene. So that's a really neat way to think about it. Some people might not be okay with your yelling, but they would be okay with growling like a tiger. These are really good things to notice and test out.
Mm-hmm.
Neat. Thanks, Gigi.
You're welcome.
Have you got a closing practice in mind for us?
Yes, well, I naturally went and did this.
Okay.
And so if you can't see, I was taking my little doll and I was giving her slow and gentle, sort of like a stroking, like how you might pet a dog, or pet the cat.
Well, the cat won't stay
So,
still, but my water bottle will. I'll
okay, so
hold and
use
stroke
an
them.
object, use a pillow, use your arm. Right now I'm using my arm. Right? So just like sometimes you can like roar like a tiger or a lion, you can also like, I don't know, I watch like little sweet cat videos. Maybe you could be that for yourself right now. Sweet cat cuddling up to you. giving yourself nice touches.
Nice pats.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just bringing more loving, soothing energy consciously into our moment.
Yeah, and like when you really think about it, if you're lucky, you're in a partnership where you feel safe and where there's a safety for nourishing touch and comforting touch, and you get to meet those needs for each other. Some people are not in that situation. Some people don't want partnership, but it doesn't take away the need for nourishing touch.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm a big believer in growing a relationship of giving yourself nourishing touch and
Yeah.
discovering what feels good.
Yeah. I noticed at some point in my family, I'll just say broadly in my family, there's an extraordinary lack of nourishing touch. And my grandma actually provided some of this for herself, but it's in what I would call an intellectualized way, which I discovered I inherited. And
Mm-hmm.
it's stroking the forehead or holding the forehead
Mm-hmm.
in this way that when I used to watch my grandma do it, it's the embodiment of like, oh dear, oh God, okay, what's next? Oh geez. And like just caressing yourself sort of through that. And I noticed myself doing that one day, and that was my cue to go, oh, I'm a bit activated right now. I'm feeling a bit, I can't remember what it was, a bit stressed out, something like that. So I was stroking my forehead like this. And that was sort of the beginning of bringing this conscious, nourishing touch to myself and noticing that with some practice, my natural response now is to give myself some nourishing touch, which used to feel clunky and awkward and fake, and now it's
Mm-hmm.
just a really helpful tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it. Yes. I think one day I'd love to talk more about the forehead touch.
Great.
Yeah. And I love it. Oh, geez. Oh, dear.
Right?
But what's neat is you started connecting when I have the oh geez, oh dear experience. It means I need some soothing. And so then you go and you practice giving yourself that, even though it feels clunky. I
Yeah.
felt clunky for me. Like right now, like if you met me now, you'd be like, oh, this lady touches all the time. Like she's always got her hand on her heart or like on her body somewhere. That was not me. Like 10 years ago, not me at all. I'd be like, what are you doing? But now I'm like, I have this magical two hands with me at any time and they can offer soothing. It
Yeah.
costs nothing. It's
Right.
great. It's
Right.
fast. It's effective.
Yeah. Yeah, it really works. At first, I
Mm-hmm.
was certainly going through the motions, and now it's a
Mm-hmm.
genuine soothing. I can actually soothe myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you noticed it. It begins to be something you don't think about anymore.
Hmm.
It's autopilot, habitual. And
Yeah.
it's also what I noticed is I would do it when I don't actually like when it's not the most dire situation. Like I
Hmm.
do it when little things come up and I help soothe those little moments. So actually bigger things don't really come up that often.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what a beautiful thing to create more of in our reality. When we're that much more loving and soothing to ourselves, it's just a fact that it's going to be folding out into all of our interactions and into every experience we have in life.
Mm-hmm. This feels like another podcast episode, but with there being so many things in the world that are outside of our control, how much we can shift and change as one individual person. One thing we have total ability to do is to be kinder to ourselves,
Hmm.
whether that's with words or touch or a combination of the two. And like you said, if we're kinder to ourselves, there's no way that doesn't ripple out into the world. You
Yeah.
bring a different energy out into the world, into every person you interact with. Right? Even every person you're not actively engaging with, they feel your energy when they
Hmm.
walk past you, when they look at you. And those are ways. Imagine if we maximize those ways of
Right.
giving back to the world.
Mm. Exactly. Exactly my
Mm-hmm.
point when I'm talking about shifting out of social work kind of help and into this kind of help. It has a 500-fold more impact, I'm going to say. I feel much
Mm-hmm.
more impactful in helping other people feel better in their lives now than I did in that angry ruminating place that I used to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm just going to say one final thing about suppression, because I think nourishing touch is one of the things we can be offering ourselves so easily. And I think we often suppress our need, our desire for soothing. We think we need to be strong and independent. And I want your cue this week, all listeners and viewers, if you notice yourself saying or thinking, I'm fine, this is fine, take that as a cue to give yourself a bit of nourishing touch and see how that feels.
Yeah. I'll be okay. We'll be fine. Yeah. That's a very good cue.
Yeah.
I like that.
Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
I think this is good.
Okay. As always, thank you guys for being here. Please do like, follow, and subscribe. And if anything we've said here today has been helpful for you, please share with somebody that you care about. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Little Gigi.